Welcome back to the show. As always, I'm Chad, and today we are going to be talking with Jacqueline Davies, who is the author of The Lemonade Wars, which is a book that came out as a chapter book in 2007 and is now coming out as a graphic novel. So we have Jacqueline here. We're going to talk about the book itself and keep bringing it to the graphic novel. So let me bring her in and let's find out more about her and the book. Hi, Jacqueline. How's it going?
Hi, Chad. It's going pretty well. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So before we get started talking about the book and bringing it to the graphic novel, tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, and about yourself as a writer.
Well, gosh, let's see. I started publishing, I think my first published book came out in 2002. It was a middle grade historical novel, actually, set in World War II at Los Alamos, New Mexico. So the backdrop was the Manhattan Project. So that was that was sort of the beginning of my career. I'd been trying to get picture books published for several years before that. And it was a middle grade novel that was the first one that actually got published. After that, I've published, I don't know, 5 or 6 picture books and a lot of middle grade. Middle grade is sort of,
Mhm.
it's my wheelhouse, I'd say. Although I do also have an early chapter book series, and I do have a YA historical novel as well. So, I'm kind of all over the place. I like to try new things. I like new challenges, and I would say that's a big part of what the graphic novel was for me. It was something new for me. I'd never written a graphic novel script before, and it was a difficult and thrilling and very enjoyable experience. So that brings me up to the present day.
So before we talk about bringing Lemonade War to the graphic novel, tell us a little bit about the book and the inspiration behind it.
So the Lemonade War is about a brother and sister who get into an argument about who can sell the most lemonade in the 5 days before school begins. And they have a relationship that is very close. They generally get along very well, but this touches off something where they get into a competition about who can sell the most lemonade, and suddenly it starts to spiral. Uh, there are all kinds of strategies, and they're marshaling their troops, getting their friends to help, and there's some dirty tricks that come up, and it really turns into something much bigger than what it started out, an all-out war. And so I was interested in a couple of things exploring in the book. The first was that I wanted to show that every argument has two sides. There are two viewpoints in any disagreement. And so the book, the original book written in prose, the first chapter is from Evan's point of view. We're inside his head, we're inside his heart. We see what he's thinking and feeling. And then the second chapter is Jesse's, and then back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So at every point along the way, you're kind of seeing the other character from one character's point of view, and then it switches and you're inside that character seeing it the other way around. So that was important to me. And then the other thing I wanted to think about, what do we do when we get stuck in a place of anger and hostility? How do we find our way back to a place of cooperation and love in this case, because they're a brother and sister and they really do love each other. They're both kind of trapped in this argument. And so I wanted to see, how do you find your way? How do you unravel that and get back to that place that you want to be?
Now, this is the first. Lemonade War is the first of it's a trilogy. Is that correct?
No, it's much more than that. The
Oh,
Lemonade War, no, because it's a surprise to me. That's why. The Lemonade War just keeps growing. So it started out as a standalone title. It was never going to be anything more. I had the idea when my two sons got into a fight about a lemonade stand. Originally, I thought, well, and I thought of the title as they got into the argument. They were arguing in front of me. I thought, oh, this is going to turn into a lemonade war. So it was the title that kind of like sparked my interest to begin with. But honestly, as I explored the idea, I thought, well, there's not really enough here. There's not really enough, So they got into an argument about a lemonade stand. Where do you go from here? There's not much here. And then when I actually sat down and tried writing the first draft, it turned out that there was more there, and there was enough to make a very full and satisfying book. But I never thought it was going to be a series. That was never the plan. And let me tell you, authors out there, if you're planning to write a series, plan it out ahead of time. Don't let it surprise you the way it did me, because the book came out, and there's a detail in the book. At the end of the book, some money goes missing. $208 from Evan's Short's pocket, and it's really just a plot point. It's not a significant piece of the story. It's just the plot point that kind of gets the story spinning in this other direction. And you never find out in that book who took that money, because that's not what the book is about. And so when I started doing school visits and visiting and answering emails and talking to kids who had read the book, they liked the book, but they all wanted to know, where did that money go? And I tried to explain, the money's not important. It was just sort of like, it was a thing that got me from point A to point B. And they said, yes, it is. It's really important. We want to know what happened to it. So that's after a year and a half of hearing that question asked everywhere I went. I went back to my editor and I said, Anne, I think I need to write a second book. And she said, okay, we can do that. So that turned into a sequel. And I said at that time, I said, do you think we could do a series? And she said, whoa, let's just do the sequel. She wasn't going to commit to a series at that point. So we did the sequel. And by the time the second book came out, the first book was selling really well. And then I went back and she said yes. And I envisioned it as a 5-book series. I really had it all plotted out in my head at that point. And I wrote the 5 books and the Magic Trap. So it's the Lemonade War, the Lemonade Crime, the Bell Bandit, the Candy Smash, and the last book at that time was the Magic Trap. And the Magic Trap really deals with one of the issues from the first book that kids are most interested in, which is, where is the dad? The dad is not present. He's mentioned a few times, and I never get into where he is, because again, he wasn't part of that story. But kids wanted to know where the dad was. So in that book, I answered that question. I felt like, oof, I've done it. I've really wrapped up the whole thing. I've answered every question any kid could have from reading the first book, and I was finished. And then when I would visit schools, kids would ask, are there going to be more Lemonade War books? And I would say, no, a series is done. I'm all finished with it. I'm working on other things. And it went on that way for a couple of years, 3, 4 years. And then I was minding my own business, and I suddenly got an idea for another story about Evan and Jesse. And I thought, oh, maybe it'll just fade away. Maybe I can just forget that I had this idea. But no, it's stuck. It's stuck. And I finally got to the point, about 6 months later, it's like, I have to try to write this book. And that became The Bridge Battle, which is currently the final book in that series. But when kids now ask me, are there going to be more Lemonade War books? I say, well, never say never. You just don't know. So we'll see. And now we've got the graphic novel coming out, which takes us back to the first book. And it's very, very exciting to be revisiting that first book, but in such a different language, a different format, a different way of telling a story.
Yeah, let's talk about that because as you said, it is a prose book originally, and um, you're adapting it to the graphic novel form.
Yeah.
What was there, an idea to do that eventually, or it's just something that came up?
You know, my original editor, she's since retired. My original editor, she was my longtime editor, 20 years. We've been working on books together. We would just talk about this brand new, interesting trend we were noticing of middle grade novels being adapted into graphic novels. Obviously, we'd been reading graphic novels for years. That wasn't anything new. But this idea of taking an already established middle grade book and turning it into a graphic novel, we just thought it was fascinating. And we would have long conversations about it and kind of muse about, how do you do that? And what's gained, what's lost, what happens in the translation. So it was just conversation because we like to talk about books. And then a friend of mine, who's also an author, told me about a 4-day writing workshop that was focused on graphic novels. And they had lots of great speakers there. Colleen A.F. Venable was there, and lots of terrific mentors were there. And she was going to go, and she said, do you want to go? And I was like, oh, well, we've been thinking about this. be sort of interesting. So I really went just out of curiosity. When I went, thinking, well, maybe the Lemonade War could be one of those books that's a middle grade novel that could be turned into it. It turned into a graphic novel, but I didn't know anything about writing graphic novels. So I went to this 4-day workshop, and it was fantastic. And I learned a lot. In a way, it opened my eyes to just how much there was to learn, like how very, very different this was. And I took a lot of notes, and I had a lot of great conversations. We would have meals together with the mentors, and we would have one-on-ones with the mentors, and then there were workshops and lectures and all kinds of things. It was really fascinating to just be able to immerse myself in that world. But then on the last morning, Sunday morning, we were all supposed to leave at noon. I got up early to go for a bike ride because I'd brought my bike with her, and I was out in rural Pennsylvania, dirt roads, not paved roads. And I had a bike accident, and I completely destroyed my left elbow. And I mean, by destroyed, I broke the bone, snapped the head off, obliterated a ligament, tore straight through a tendon. It was a really, really bad injury. And I don't want to say it wiped out everything I learned in that workshop, but it definitely kind of like took over my brain space. So the workshop ended in a very unfortunate way, but it was a lovely, very kind of welcoming and warm introduction to the world of writing graphic novels. So I did leave there thinking I want to give this a try, even if it's just for me, even if it's just a writing exercise, even if it's just something I try. I just want to give it a try. And that's how I left that workshop and kind of embarked on the idea of writing the script.
So where did you start? And when you finally decided to make the adaptation, how did you start? And how did was was the kind of the process?
Yeah, wow. Okay, we could talk about that for a while. When I left the 4-day workshop, one of the best things I had in my suitcase was that one of the attendees who had written a graphic novel before and was now in the process of writing another graphic novel, but had come to the workshop just to kind of, you know, learn more. Learn more. You can always learn more. She gave me the script, the graphic novel script for a graphic novel that was already published. So when I went home, I could get a copy of that other book, which I did, and I could turn page by page. I could read the script and then see what was on the page, and then read the script, see what was on the page. And I could really kind of start to make the connections of, oh, this is how you make that happen. This is how you communicate this. This is how you work in emotion, action, and dialogue, which those are the things you have to work with a graphic novel. You don't have narration, at least not in great amounts. To be honest, in the Lemonade War, I don't think there's much more narration than the next day or 3 days earlier, just to kind of set you in time. So that's new for somebody who's been writing prose novels, to not have narration to do a lot of the work. Suddenly you had to, in your mind, envision what the illustrator could do, and be willing and amenable to the idea of passing that off to the illustrator. So I started writing my graphic novel script. Now, remember, I'm starting from a book that I know so well. It's in my bones. I know the Lemonade War. It's in my bones. And I had the published book right there next to me. And what I found I was doing was transcribing. I was just basically taking every bit of dialogue and putting it into script form, and also every movement, every gesture, every eye roll, every shrug of the shoulders. I just kept just transcribing everything into the script, and it was just, even I could tell this is way too long. So about 50 pages in, I said, "Oh, this is not working. This is slow and ponderous, and it was like stop action. It was like, first the character does this and says one word, then in the next panel the character does this and says one word." And so I went back, and that's when I started to kind of loosen up and let go of the book a little bit. The plot stays the same, but I let go of the book a little bit. And then in revision, there was a whole nother leap forward where I submitted the graphic novel script to my new editor now, because my older one had retired. And the comments that came back on that draft were all the same. Every page or every other page, it was, can you combine these two panels into one panel? Can you combine these three panels into one panel? How about all four of these panels into one panel? And I started to understand and play with the concept, well, the idea of pacing and how
Mhm.
quickly you need to keep things moving along. It's not like in a prose novel. That was a really important distinction for me to understand and to trust how much a talented illustrator can accomplish in a single panel. How time, there can be a passage of time in a single panel. There can be multiple dialogues. There can be, they can go through two or three pieces of speech in one panel. We can see emotion change within a single panel. It doesn't have to be this stop action where you get oh, now she's mad, now she's a little bit nervous, now she's this. An illustrator can accomplish all of that in a single panel. So I cut 80 pages out of that first draft, just by tightening panel by panel, not by cutting any large part of the plot out, but just tightening panel by panel. It got leaner. We sent it off to the illustrator. When it came back, there were a couple of ones we were like, we were a little too ambitious here. You really can't have all that happening in one panel. And then we would break it down again. But that was probably the single most significant change for me, going from prose to graphic novel, was this idea of understanding how much you can accomplish within a single panel.
Now, who's the illustrator for the book?
Karen de la Vega. Oh, she's so great. I'm so happy that she's doing the book. And I I was allowed to look at some of the people that HarperCollins was considering, and she's the one I chose. She's the one I said, that's who we want. And I remember really specifically, because at that point we were just looking at her portfolio. We didn't have any sample character sketches or anything like that. So what I saw in her portfolio, and it was really just 2 or 3 pages with, different things on each page, how talented she was at using composition and lighting to create tension in a panel. So even without necessarily words that were showing what was going on, you could tell by looking scene by scene that, from an angle or the way the light came in or just the way things were filling the frame, it created a sense of tension, which I think is really, really important. It means that even if nothing's happening in the book, she's got us hooked because of the composition that she's using. The other thing is how good she was at showing really nuanced expressions on faces. It wasn't just like surprise and happy and sad. It's like she really could get that strange thing where you're feeling a little insecure, but you're also trying to make it look like you're not insecure, and you're maybe starting to cry. She could get it all on a single face, and I was just amazed by that. And then finally, the way she would have action happen either in a single panel or over a few panels. There was this particular thing where there's a kid sitting at desks in a row in a classroom, and there's a girl and she's got a ponytail, and there's a boy behind her, and we see it from his view, and there's the ponytail, and you can tell he just really can't resist, and his hand starts to reach out and he grabs the ponytail and he yanks it, and she turns around and she punches him in the face. I mean, just this was all over like 2 or 3 postage stamp size panels, and it was just like, oh God, she's so good at showing action, and that matters so much in a graphic novel.
So when you were going back and adapting the book, the prose for the graphic novel, was there anything that kind of like wanted to? I don't say. Yeah, I don't think you can. Well, you can change it. It's your thing. You can change whatever you want, I guess. But
I can do anything I want. I think you're asking when I looked at the original, went back and read it. Was there anything that made me cringe?
Uh,
um,
that
Not
you
so
kind
much.
of wanted to, did
Well, there,
you noticed that, maybe, an inexperienced you know,
right,
did that the more experienced you now or
right.
then.
Yes, no, I mean it's true. We change. It's not even about so much experience versus inexperience, but we change as people. And so my older self, I do think I am wiser than I was in my 20s. And I do think I have a broader perspective. So so as much as it's the experience, having experience in terms of expressing myself well in writing, but then also just being an older, wiser person. Yeah, going back can sometimes be difficult. I have to admit, The Lemonade War is a good book. I mean, and I don't say that about every one of my books. So believe me when I say it, there's a reason why it's my best-selling book. There's a reason why it is so wildly popular. There's a reason why it's in, multiple translated into multiple different languages and kids all over the world are reading it. There's a reason why schools have adopted it as a one school, one book reading event. It's a simple story. It's clearly told, and it has great meaning for kids because it touches on sibling rivalry and competition and money, making money, which kids are really interested in. So when I go back and look at it, I feel like it's a pretty accomplished book as this kind of like contained, you know, contained story that I was telling. Is it my most ambitious book? No, but it's very successful in what it's trying to do. So, no, when I went back to read it, to turn it into the graphic novel, there was nothing that I wanted to change, except once in a while I thought, oh, if I hadn't added that into the original book, I could move more quickly through the graphic novel
Mhm.
part of this. But the only things that I did update were in the original book, Evan was saving up money to get an iPod. And I just don't think
A
iPods are
what?
all that. And yes, what? What kind of crazy talk is that? Yeah, so now he's saving up, hoping that he can get an iPhone. So that
Okay.
changed. I feel like there was one other, isn't that funny? One other technological thing that changed. Uh, Maybe it had something to do with the mother in her office because she has a home office up in her attic. Maybe it was something about that, but just a couple of little tweaks. Everything else, I did think very seriously, do I need to update the amount of money they charge for a glass of lemonade? Because that definitely changes over time. But
Inflation,
that
tariffs.
inflation, absolutely, lemons coming across the border. I mean, so I did think about that and I thought, no, it's okay. It's okay that that stays the same because that, in a way, is all relative. You go to different places, different parts of the country, different types of towns, which I do because I do school visits, rural, city, East Coast, West Coast, North, South, all over the place. And something like that would be different in each place. So I decided, what, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Plus, I didn't want to have to redo all the math. There's a lot of math in the book related to how much the lemonades cost, how much the canned lemonade cost, and how much the cups cost, and all that stuff. So
Do
I
they
just thought,
take tap and go? Do they, take
right,
debit?
no, there's no
PayPal?
Venmo. There's no, 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 no. It's all. Can you believe it? It's a world of cash. It's a world of cash, which is really, yeah, probably of all the things in the original book, that might be the most out of date. But I think even today, lemonade stands generally run on cash. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure about that.
I mean, I've seen it. I live in upstate New York, and I've seen a couple in our neighborhood. So
Yeah, oh no. Kids are still doing. I still stop anytime I see a lemonade stand. I stop and I buy a cup, and often take pictures of the kids because it's just it's it's such a great activity in so many different ways. So many different ways. Gets kids out in real life. They're in their communities. They're in their neighborhoods. They're talking to their neighbors. They're making something and then selling it, seeing that, making that connection, which is, I
Mhm.
think, important for kids to understand. You do some work, you get paid for it. You can take that money, and then you've got a choice. You're going to save it, or you're going to spend it, or you're going to give it to charity, which is also in the story. Those kind of things are in the story. So I think it's a terrific thing. My kids did lemonade stands when they were little. well, that's how the book started because my boys got in a fight about a lemonade stand. I did lemonade stands when I was little. I think it's a terrific activity for kids to engage in.
So what's the perfect lemon to water to sugar ratio for a
Okay,
cup of
so
lemonade?
when first of all, in all the lemonade stands I have visited, I have never come across one that made it from scratch. It's always from concentrate, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But to all the people viewing, let me just say, if you've never had homemade lemonade, oh, it's like a totally different beverage. Um, I made gallons and gallons. The year that the original book came out, I would do book events and I would take homemade lemonade with me in this big canister, one of those old fashioned glass canisters with the little spigot that I would turn. So I used to know the recipe by heart. I don't think I do anymore. I believe it was 1 cup of lemon juice, 4 cups of water, and a cup of sugar. And then I would expand that to be gallons and gallons and gallons of lemonade. And the trick is to create a syrup. You can't just throw it all in there. You have to put the sugar into some water and boil it for a little bit so that it makes a syrup, and then add everything else, and it's just like it's out of this world. It's so delicious.
So what is the biggest thing that you've talked about, you're learning to, t take the prose and to the graphic novel. What do you think is the biggest lesson you uh, took away, and do you plan on using it for your next prose novel?
Right. Oh, that's a really interesting question. You're saying, what did I learn from translating from prose into graphic novel that I will then apply back to the prose? You know, Pacing is an issue in both forms. Um, Perhaps I felt it more acutely in the graphic novel. I'm pretty good at pacing in prose. Every writer has strengths and weaknesses, and that's dialogue and pacing are kind of my two strengths. So I do it fairly intuitively in the prose form. It was when I went to the graphic novel form that I really had to think very carefully about what parts of the story to speed up, what parts of the story to slow down. And you have such a distinct way of measuring whether you are going fast through the story or slowing down in the graphic form, because you've got page breaks and you've got panels, distinct panels. And so those are your tools for speeding things up and slowing things down. So I learned a lot about pacing in the graphic form, and I do think I will take that back with me to the prose form. But more than that, I think I'm going to take what I learned in the graphic form for the next time I write a graphic novel script, which I hope I'll be doing soon. I actually have an idea for an original graphic novel script that I would love to try writing. I mean, that's going to be, for me, that's going to be like jumping over the edge, because the original prose book that I had written, that I was working from, that was my security blanket. That was my lifeline. That's what I clung to. And now I'll just be like, whoo, going out into air and free falling with a brand new story. So I think that'll be really interesting to do. I also, as I've been visiting schools now, I've been having more and more kids asking, are there going to be more graphic novels of the Lemonade War? And that would be interesting to do as well. So I know that I will definitely take the lessons I learned from this first attempt and apply them to either more adaptations of the Lemonade War series, or an original graphic novel.
So, who are your, uh, you know, influences when it comes to, your writing?
Oh gosh. I read I read so many different things for all ages, nonfiction, fiction, um, and I'm constantly like cycling through books. So that's really hard to say. I have the authors who were extremely influential for me at the beginning of my career. So that would be like Lois Lowry, Catherine Patterson, uh, just people who, um, Sharon Creech, people whose books I read over and over again as my primer. How do I do this? How do I write stories like this? So there was that group, and then as I became more experienced and grew older, um, there was keeping my eye on all the kind of new and up and coming people. When I think about graphic novels, Um, and I wouldn't say that that is the bulk of my reading. I do read graphic novels, and I do keep up with new ones, particularly when friends can recommend something to me. I've just got on my shelf. I've got Lightfall, which is the first in a, I don't know what it is, trilogy. It's middle grade. So I do keep up on what's new. But going back, graphic novels go back a long way, as you know. And so I remember reading Mouse by Art Spiegelman. I
Mhm.
remember reading Stitches by David Smalls. I remember reading American Born Chinese, which, man, talk about a tour de force of storytelling. Three different stories that are all engaging on their own, and then all that come together in this way that is just like takes the whole story to a different level. Um, so these were books that I read years and years and years ago before I ever considered writing a graphic novel, but they have stayed with me, and I know that there are lessons from them that I carry forward. If only to adopt that sense of ambition and say, look what they did. Look at
Mhm.
what they accomplished. Man, I'd like to try to do something as mind-blowing as those books.
Yeah. So, as we kind of start to wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to mention about working on the graphic novelization of the Lemonade War that maybe we didn't get to cover, or you wanted to make sure that people knew about?
Well, I do want to say that I'm very excited at the thought. I'm very excited by this book coming out. This is my 20th book, and I don't think I've been this excited about a book coming out in a while. And I think that's because um, I'm excited at the thought of it opening doors to the story that I'm telling, and possibly to the series and to reading in general, because we all know. Um, it's been a trend for a while, but I think COVID and the pandemic really accelerated the whole thing. That we're losing a lot of kids to reading, especially around the age of 9. More and more kids at the age of 9 report that they no longer read outside of class for pleasure. They only read in the classroom because reading is a part of what they're expected to do. And that's a scary prospect because those are tomorrow's readers, adult readers. Um, and so there are kids who will not pick up a prose book, but will gravitate toward a graphic novel. So I'm excited at the thought that there are kids out there who might never have picked up the Lemonade War, the original edition, and now they will pick it up. And maybe that will lead them to read the original and to read the next book and the next book and the next book. So the thought of reaching a new audience is very exciting for me after all these years, because the book's been out for a while, and so after all these years to have a new audience that might gravitate toward it, I'm really excited about that.
I will give you a glimmer of hope. I have an 8-year-old son, and he loves to read. He's big into, let's see, Captain Underpants, Dogman,
Yes.
um, and he there are evenings where I have to. He'll come in to me after I've gone to bed, and he's supposed to have been in bed and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I stayed up reading." So,
That's a good thing. That's wonderful.
and when we were he's moving up to the next grade. And so when we were in the one of the teacher's classrooms, looked around in the classroom and I saw Lemonade War on her chalkboard as one of the books that they were probably reading. So,
That's
he-
exciting. The Lemonade War really has found a place in classrooms, and nothing delights me more. The teachers do an amazing job of coming up with creative, multidisciplinary, action-oriented lesson plans where they have the kids having lemonade stands or making charts about profits and loss or doing artwork related to the book, and they've adopted the book and they use it regularly, and I'm so grateful to all the teachers and librarians who have done that.
well, if you want to give one last pitch for the book and where people can find you, if you're on social media,
Yeah,
then
sure.
that'd be great.
um, Yeah, you can find me on my website. You can find me on Instagram. Instagram, I'm Jacqueline Davies Books underscore. I have a YouTube channel, Jacqueline Davies 9. I'm on Blue Sky. You can just look for my name on that. And I also have a newsletter. I'm going to pitch that. Please go to my website, right on the homepage. Just scroll down a little bit. There's a sign up for the newsletter. Once a month, I put out a newsletter, tell you a little bit about what's going on with my books. I always have free book giveaways. So if anybody likes to get some free books, that'd be great. And I'm about to embark, well, in a couple of weeks, on a 10 city book tour. And I'll be sending like little dispatches from the road just to
Mhm.
let you know what's going on there. So sign up for the newsletter.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time today to chat with us about the graphic novel version of the Lemonade War, and hopefully, you'll just, hopefully it'll do well, and you'll be able to, do the rest of the books.
That is
You,
the
you,
hope.
you know what to
That
do
is the hope.
now.
I know. Now that I've learned it, I really feel like I want to use it. Thank you for having me. It's really been a pleasure to talk with you.
All right. Yeah, thank you, and we'll be in touch. And best of luck as you go on your tour and as the book
Wonderful.
hits stands. And you said it hits stands in end of April, I believe.
It publishes April 29th. And
All right.
if this is coming out before April 29th, you can pre-order the book through silverunicornbooks.com. And if you pre-order there, I will autograph the book for you, put your name in it. There's a special sticker sheet, really fun Lemonade War stickers that you'll get, and the books will be shipped to you on or before, actually, fingers crossed, we're hoping for before April 29th. So that's a good place to get like a fun little pre-order bonus.
Oh, very nice. All right. Well, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Bye bye.